And she had a lot of clout in Bohemian, as they called it back in the late 19th, early 20th century circles. Bohemians, what you would call hippies or beatniks. But Bohemians were a little more sophisticated. They weren't like total losers. You know, they weren't just dropouts. They wanted to live a certain way of life, an artistic sort of,
Yeah, I heard that like they were forced to move around because like two countries were like fighting their.
Yeah, that may be one of the origins of the word, but Bohemian was applied to any arty sort of person back then. Anyone, but it's true, probably Bohemians moved around because they were
Russians.
Yeah, but they were also a little bit connected to gypsies too. So at that time, so it's all very. But that's not what the artistic people were. They weren't really from Bohemia. They were. That was just a word applied to them.
This group was moneyed.
Well, she would have. There would always be a patron who had money. You know, the individuals had no money, but you know, Bohemians always had someone who was shelling out money to support somebody. You had to have money. I mean, you know, they weren't living in communes, if that's what you mean. But people like James Joyce in English literature would be considered a Bohemian sort of person. Going back further, if you know French literature, the poet Baudelaire, that would be a Bohemian sort of person. André Gide, all the painters of the Impressionist period, they would all be called Bohemians. Toulouse-Lautrec, that's what the Bohemians were. So you can't call those people beatniks. You know, that's an American sort of more recent expression. Or hippies. They're more intellectual and more arty and more. They had some money occasionally. Yeah.
George O'Keeffe was one of them.
She'd be a Bohemian. Yeah, that's a very good example. George O'Keeffe, who came out and went to New Mexico to get her final inspiration for her paintings and things. Yeah. But she was originally hanging out in a Bohemian crowd in Greenwich Village in New York with famous photographers like Alfred Stieglitz and people like that. So she would be a Bohemian crowd in New York City before she went out to New Mexico also. But Lawrence got that house because he gave his manuscript copy of Lady Chatterley's Lover to Mabel Dodge, who had the big house inside of Taos. And by the way, that house is still there. You know who owned it until recently, the house she had there in Taos? You know that guy, he's in a lot of movies, my memory is no good, but in Easy Rider, he wasn't Peter Fonda, but Peter Fonda's friend.
Dennis Hopper.
Dennis Hopper, right, thanks. He had that house for about 25 years, and he got fed up with it. I met his wife some years back in LA over a book signing that I was at and stuff, and it was obviously they were all living up in Hollywood now, so. So they're not out in Taos in Mexico, but he bought that house and was living there, I guess, after Easy Rider, and a lot of people would hang out there with him, I guess. It's a very big house. Now I think it's a convention center in the middle of Taos. Anyway, I don't know if you've been to Taos, but it's the old Spanish capital of what we now call New Mexico. That was the capital. Santa Fe, I don't think, was the capital. Taos was the actual capital. I think, anyway, maybe both were, but they were both not far from each other anyway. Lady Chatterley's Lover, that's why we're really doing this person in this class. We don't read in this class Lady Chatterley's Lover. You say, well, what's Lady Chatterley's Lover? Oh, well, let me see if I can explain it to you. Lady Chatterley's Lover would have been published in the 20s, and it was maybe 1925 or so. It's the reason you have all the pornographic movies, all the pornographic books, all the pornographic magazines that you presently enjoy. I mean, that broke the pornography line, because that book was banned everywhere. You couldn't, you weren't allowed to read it in America. You couldn't import it into America. as I think I told you, when we were traveling on the hippie backpack type road generation, we didn't smuggle, hash or pot into America. Things like we would smuggle books into America. That's what we. So you'd take a copy of Lady Chatterley's Lover that'd be printed in Paris, and you'd put on a book cover, maybe like Peyton Place or something on the cover. I don't know what you put on the cover, but you'd put it in a different cover, and then you'd bring it in, because the customs inspectors were all looking for that kind of thing. They weren't looking for what they look for nowadays. That's what they were looking for, the banned books, like Henry Miller. And it was the case, I think it went up to the Supreme Court about Lady Chatterley's Lover that broke all of that.
Wasn't it Fanny Hill?
No, it was, Lady Chatterley's Lover was before Fanny Hill.
Really?
Yeah, that was a later case for some reason. I don't know why that was.
Oh, there was, okay.
Fanny Hill was a much later case, I think. No, Lady Chatterley's Lover was in the 50s, that got broken. Late 50s. Anyway, it was also, Joyce's Ulysses was also a problem because of Molly Bloom's soliloquy, if you know that work. I'm losing some of you. These are great works of English literature. But D.H. Lawrence was the person who was identified with this more than anyone else. And he brought about, if you want to call it, the sexual revolution, if you want to call it that. Not just because he was writing specifically about that sort of thing, but also that people were affected by it and it changed their outlook and so on. Now, I don't like D.H. Lawrence's novels very much, though. His novels he's mostly famous as a novelist. How many of you have ever heard of D.H. Lawrence before this class? Yeah, about a third of you. That's a very poor sign. It's not your fault, it's a sign of the decay of modern culture. That's all I can tell you. Because you should have been taught this sort of stuff in grade school. And you need to come to college to hear about these things. But he was considered, he lived from around the 1880s. I think we have in your introduction, there'll be some sort of timeline for him. The 1880s, and I think he died around 1931 or so. I don't think he lived much past his mid-40s, early to mid-40s, huh? 46, was he? And he was very ill with tuberculosis. And tuberculosis was considered, was called consumption in those days. It was considered the Bohemian disease.